Russia was not prepared for such a fight, the preconditions for Ukraine's victory in the war. It is almost impossible to take over one of the largest countries in Europe with a population of 40 million people and hold it, said a former KGB agent. The resistance of the Ukrainian army against the Russian one, in the first week of the war, turned out to be far stronger and more determined than the Russian president, Vladimir Putin, had expected, or rather than the generals had promised him. Now it has turned into a very painful and destructive war. Apparently Putin hoped that Kiev could be taken within a few days of the Russian forces invading. And he almost certainly counted on the Western countries, intimidated and divided, accepting that Moscow had recaptured, in Putin's eyes, ancestral Russian territory. But neither happened, as Ukraine proved to be a tough nut to crack, and the reaction of the West, especially Germany, was much tougher than the Russian president had expected. Many think that Ukraine will win the war against Russia because the attack was a miscalculation by Russian President Vladimir Putin. To start this war, according to a deep conviction, one simply had to go mad. Well, first of all, there was no reason to do so either in Putin or in Russia. They had already shamelessly seized Crimea and eastern Ukraine, so to speak. According to many opinions, this was primarily Putin's imperial ambitions. Russia was simply not ready for a large-scale attack on Ukraine. The invasion of Kiev is a ploy without a clear program of action, and without the expectation that Ukraine would retaliate so decisively and courageously. The Russian leadership, including Putin himself, certainly considered Ukraine's weakness as such, both economic and military, as a calculation. Apparently, that was the reason why all this madness started. Putin started this war to prevent Ukraine from joining NATO, but as a result, the number of NATO member states on Russia's northwestern borders has increased with Finland and Sweden. It looks like Ukraine will win the whole war, just as it won the last few battles. In an offensive, the attacking side must normally be stronger in every respect, starting with troop strength, which should be at least 3 times greater. But at the time of the Russian invasion of Ukraine, the troops of both sides were about the same size. To invade one of the largest European countries with a population of 40 million, even if one imagines that this takeover will be successful, it is simply impossible to keep this territory under its influence. What forces alone are needed for this, and how many human victims have been accepted by Putin in Ukraine, as well as in Russia, is frightening. The Russian economy, too, has suffered a blow. Although many partners have turned away from Russia, in the face of Western sanctions because of Moscow's war against Ukraine. Sino-Russian trade is booming. From January to August, bilateral trade volume grew 31.4% to $117.2 billion, according to data released by the China Customs Service. Russia is an important source of oil, gas, coal and agricultural products for the People's Republic. However, Western experts predict that Russia's economy is in decline. And the Kremlin leader will therefore be toppled at some point in the near future, both by the Ukrainian people and the people living in Russia. These are all serious failures in Putin's plan, due to his own miscalculations. Isolated by the coronavirus pandemic, Putin has rarely met with advisors. And those he did meet with seemed to tell him only what he wanted to hear. But as long as Putin is in power, he will look for new opportunities. He has never retreated after failures, and will always strike again, and harder, and to do so he has all the necessary means. The Ukrainian ambassador to the United States claims that the Russian army has already used thermo-barium weapons, popularly known as vacuum bombs. Such projectiles first spray a flammable aerosol into the air and then detonate the resulting gas cloud, creating a massive explosion at a very high temperature, which has enormous lethality with relatively low accuracy. At times like this, ambassadors often exaggerate by reporting the unbelievable, but the incontrovertible fact is that we have already seen Russian Thermobar missiles on their way to Ukraine. Analysts believe that their wider use is only a matter of time. Photos of shelled areas in Kiev show tracks similar to those of cluster bombs. As they approach their target, the shells disintegrate into a multitude of small bombs that cause horrific shrapnel wounds to everyone in the target area. Cluster bombs are banned by a 2008 international convention, but Russia has refused to sign the document, claiming that it uses them in accordance with international law. However, the general principle is the same. When Russia's interests are at stake, civilian lives may well be neglected. The question is, if things don't go the way President Putin wants in Ukraine, could he use nuclear weapons? This option cannot be completely ruled out, although most analysts believe it is still a long way off. Putin has indeed warned that outside interference in the situation in Ukraine would have dire consequences, both for individuals and for history as a whole. He also said that the existence of a world without Russia makes no sense. However, it should be borne in mind that NATO commanders would also have to miscalculate very seriously for a nuclear war to break out. History can repeat itself. In 1939, Stalin attacked Finland, expecting to win within a few days. However, Finland put up a strong defense, and the Soviet army suffered an embarrassing defeat. The fighting lasted over 100 days, Finland lost some territory but retained its independence. We are only at the beginning of the conflict, and the mere fact that Ukraine is putting up a good fight does not mean that it will be able to withstand the Russian onslaught for long. However, the first round certainly went well, and the West's reaction was stronger than many expected. However, the West is slowly running out of ammunition. And what that means and what the consequences will be, we will soon find out.